To play the B-flat minor prelude by Bach from the Well-Tempered Clavier Book 1 is not just to play one more prelude of so many he wrote. It's to play one of the most important single one. No matter how many, each of them has an individual personality. And this one evolves as well within life because of its appoggiatura, its lament, its delay, its repeated anticipated note before the delay for the lament of the appoggiatura, its speech more than sing, its profound, peaceful, ostinato, B-flat minor bass, and it's step by step, rising slowly, painfully, dissonantly, literally by step, like Sisyphus trying to climb the mountain and then dropping to restart. Perhaps I put in too much of storytelling, psychological imagination in a piece of music that is only a few minutes long. But then again, it's not the time it takes that matters, it's the time it lives with you after you've heard it. Let's play it. It continues to play in you. It continues to talk in you. It continues to echo in you psychologically. It's incredibly emotional, deep, tense, but tightly and tenderly released, dissipated appoggiaturas and dissonances. The very sound color painting of consonant dissonances. It gives the sense of minor and major combined with chords that are like, wow, B flat, D flat, F, A, C, E flat. They're not sevenths, they're not tens, 11ths, 12ths, 13ths, 14ths. Well, beyond 15 you cannot have a chord. But the point is that they accumulate in a way that they stack up on top of each other with different types of thirds that create a sense of dissonance with the leading tone for the rich and quality overtones of the root. In other words, even describing them sounds so unemotional, unmeaningful, just describing anatomically, not spiritually, what the combinations of these sounds stacked on top of each other create in tension, release, dissonance, consonance, major, minor, major, smile with a tear, and all of these effects. And taken alone, they can be reproduced. But then what? You only get to scratch on the surface and imitate and obtain some kind of a trick? At best, no. It's not the effects combined that make the piece. It's not the knowledge of the understanding analytically of its harmonic progression, of its tempo that would suggest the sense of lament, because we've seen, heard other pieces of Bach that do that in mostly sacred works with choir or, In other words, we develop a knowledge, but in fact, it should always remain an emotion. The same that the listener hears the first time they discover it. It is very important for the performer, the interpreter, as they call them. We know what it means for composers, betrayers. So the player, the keyboardist, especially when he's not on the original harpsichord. Traitors, betrayers for the instrument on. What's left? I'm preaching against my own. But in fact, it's the intervals. It's the gestural rhetoric. You can explain it after you hear it. You can describe it before you play it, as I just do now. But then while you play it, it describes itself. It doesn't need me. Didn't need me, and it won't need me since the text was here before and will be after us. And thankfully, somebody notated it. If it wasn't him, thank God, because so many he improvised are lost since nobody could record them, and plethora were improvised for different occasions by Bach on the organ, on the harpsichord, in his job situation as well as in his private life or as a teacher. So we lost so much treasure. Especially now that we're in the 21st century where the reproducers are the creators because we have publishers and recordings and videos and YouTube and everything is accumulated like layers and layers of interpretations. But the real composition is the notes themselves, which naturally don't speak on their own. They're dead on the page. And they come alive. And they come alive with the desire and the emotion and the meaningful storytelling, sound painting of the performer. Yeah, you can study them, you can memorize them, you can write them from memory as I did, but that doesn't mean that you will display them in the single time through. That has to matter. Because that's the beauty of the ephemeral construction. It's like beautiful, detailed and structured sound of a sandcastle on the beach, and then the wave comes in. So as soon as you finish the last note of the prelude, the one you just ephemerally constructed in an emotional build-up of feelings through the sounds of the composer, vanishes as soon as done. But it stays playing in our psyche like echoes in. And then as a performer, you start thinking, how should I do it better again? I can do it again better. Let me try a third, 10th, 20th, 100th time. Oh, this time I got better the phrasing, but then the legato and the singing, but then the pedal. All it overlaps the dissonance. I don't want to carry dissonance into the next chord. Can I try finger pedal? What about the inner voice? Si, do, re, mi, fa. We know for the top, but fa, si, la, si, do, re for the middle. So, but it is a middle voice. Does it mean it's less? Well, it does mean it's a little bit less, but not that much less. In fact, you can think of it as principal when you play it. Fa, si, la, si, do. Si, do, re, do, re, mi. Is it my place to colorize it by voicing it according to my fancy? Or is it my place to play for you like it is written, and then let you choose what your psyche, your imagination, your emotional hearing will bring you to discover, to follow, to bring out, to sculpt in the texture. Of course, provided you know the piece. And if you don't know the piece, then you'll just hear it through my voicing. I will tell you, this secondary voice is so enticing. It's so more meaningful than the first. Don't just listen to the soprano. Think the beautiful suspension, appoggiatura, delayed resolution. Fa, si, la, si, do, instead of si, do, re, mi. And each chord is a crunch that can be arpeggiated to smell the perfumes of each of those notes that comes in and disappears ephemerally, and combined the arpeggio gives us the feeling that we hear the sound just before the sound evaporates. The sounds start, live, and die. Decay, as we call it on the piano. With the pedal, it decays later. But then the overtones, the harmonics are not the same. The beating of the resonance is wah, 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 instead of oh, like a vibrato. Ti, da, 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 ti, da, da, or without. Ti, da, da, di, da, da. And we imagine arias of his church music, and we think, "Ich bin mein Gott schnell und schnöhen tun ans Schnecken höhen stuft," whatever German words. Because Bach thought constantly in German, his sacred music, so beautifully. Everything is intertwined for him, his faith, his language, and of course Luther for the faith, and his job. So he didn't just do a church job as any other job. He did it also with conviction, because he was, well, you don't preach a convert, he was already. There is a sense of earnestness, a sense of honesty in everything he does. Even in the complexity of his chromaticisms and his polyphonies, there is something extremely beautifully simple, or rather evident, because simple could mean simplistic, and I don't want to give that pejorative secondary idea to the hint of the meaning. No, it's something self-evident. It's like some kind of truth that you state because it's what it is, let less nor more. And you feel like you're brought to a point in your life where you need to stand for the peace, and you stand with the peace. You've been with the peace, as I was since a child. You'll be with the peace until you depart. And then you share the peace as a performer. Of course, as a teacher, as a composer, but not a recomposer. Just a keyboardist, let's put it. there it is, vanished. What was? I don't remember. Perhaps ta-da-da, 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 ta-da-da. Yeah. And it starts living in you. It stays with you. Of course, on this ephemeral single time through, which I planned without to plan, because I've played it and heard it and learned it and studied it and taught it for 40 years, but I still rediscover its beauties as if they're discovered for the first time, and it's not faked marvelment. It's the truth. It reveals itself to you through different aspects, voices, harmonizations, and finally, it doesn't matter through what. It's just perhaps the pace of the tempo. If I had started it in a less slow tempo, it would be less lamenting but more phrase direction. And you see where I'm going. So it's more meaningful than emotional. If I play slower, I insist on each syllable. I spell the words. But the sentence is less obvious in terms of beginning and end of storytelling with meaning. It just becomes atmospherically beautiful. This harmony for this, for this. So you have to find the balance when you rationalize your emotion. That's a good one, isn't it? To try lifelong. Well, I failed at least finding it, but I wish you will. It's either or in general, especially in this kind of emotional piece. Would it be in major? It's splendidly beautiful, but self-evident as major is very simple mode with two tetrachords that are exactly symmetric. There's no subtlety, complexity with half minor, like the ending with minor major, minor 6, major 3rd. This kind of thing in major doesn't exist. It's all or none. But in major, in the same key, B flat major if it were, the first partita, it's radiant. How can it not? And so well organized. Like those French gardens in the castles of the Baroque. Well, all the trees are shaped like poodles. Sometimes are also shaped. And then here. And when you hear the repeated notes in minor, which anticipation to the appoggiatura, it's what Bach did in 1720s, but what a century later Chopin does in 1820s when he writes his fourth ballade. And now, because we consider the Romantic era beyond the form that broke it with Beethoven, from Haydn's first Viennese school inheritance, and then what happens? You play just to display your feelings, and so you have here in 1720 a lot of this emotional, what will become in the Romantic era, self-evident expression. Except that in Chopin, for the interpretation, I suggest that the short notes, 16th notes in this case, instead of passing tones or decorative, become the emotionally crescendo emotional. In Baroque, that sounds to me on the piano exaggerated for the passing tones. I rather stay. And the 16th notes is passing tones. But in the fourth ballade, would do the crescendo. So the expression would be in the decoration, and in the Baroque, the expression is not in the decoration, but in the repeated melodic notes that have a different purpose for each of them. The downbeat, the anticipation, the appoggiatura, delaying the real note, which is the release on the C. And I think this way you can define on the modern piano, when you play Chopin or Bach, even if Chopin was completely enamored with this romantic, as we call it for the era today, but not then, aspect of Bach's expression, the lament, if you want, rather, we can express stylistically differently on the same keyboard by not doing the hairpin crescendo on the 16th notes. As we do in Chopin. So then we define by the stylistic choices in interpretation, not only by knowledge but also by desire to have a different soundscape in which we have the sound painting, which is expressive for 1720 and which is differently expressive for 1820. I'm returning to our friend Bach. And our friend Chopin. Though the beauty is that we are driven to forget those boundaries of style, to forget that we don't play the instrument for which they are meant, to forget that they're supposed to be Baroque and romantic, to forget who anticipated or who imitated, and of course obviously Chopin did, but the point is not there. The point is that each express their emotional outcry, would it be perhaps more for the lyrical sacred music aspect in Bach than in Chopin, regardless. At some point it's a spiritual uplifting which drives them to write better, bigger, greater, higher than their own beings. And they leave it for us to touch, to play, to share with our own people of our own time period. Even if these are music written 100 to 200 years ago, during the moment of the playing, this ephemeral moment, they are now. They're not before. They're not old museum music. They're living expressions. It's our emotion of the day and our organization of the day. Who's to say it's not me who wrote it? Well, obviously we know it's not me. But when you play it, you get like an actor to enter in the character to the point to which people believe you are the character, not the actor who plays the character to be believed. Because if you do, then you're not good enough. A sense of identification, and then you finish the piece, and all of a sudden, all of this inner world in a tear was something amazing that happened, that was told. And we all keep it for ourselves, as we received it differently. And through life, we play it differently. Through life, we hear it differently. We understand it differently. But in fact, it's the same way, just deeper, just higher, just more moving or less. Or we think, oh, why did I do this when I was younger in it? I shouldn't have played it too early. Now that I have the wisdom, I would like to add this, the tempo, the phrasing, the articulation, the pedal, the direction, the line, the touch, the legato, the singing. And then the rubato. And why in home? Oh my God, what do you mean? In Bach? Of course. Oh no, really? No, but not too much. And all of these things. It's also silly when you put it in a list. It's like a cooking recipe. But in fact, I think each ingredient blends and merges, and we are immersed in the piece like we enter in the taste of it. What a marvelous opportunity to continue to share this music since discovery until this departure, since it will be here after us. But during, I really deeply enjoyed being with it and sharing it with you and the audiences. It's actual, after all.